Ally Techies, the insights of inclusive innovation. Space produced by the European Blind Union, the voice of blind and partially sighted people in Europe. Welcome, dear friends of Ally Techies. You know that this is a space where we discuss the insights of inclusive innovation, where we talk with experts who are currently developing solutions to make the lives of blind and partially sighted people more accessible. Today we are going to cover a very interesting subject, gaming. I'm pretty sure that a lot of you are very familiar with how gaming has become, or at least how developers are trying to work to make gaming more accessible for visually impaired people across the world. And today it's a special occasion, not only because we're covering the subject of gaming. You can also see that we are using a new format today, and for that occasion, for that new format, we have a special guest, Xander Ashwell from Wales, Director of Accessibility and User Experience at Microsoft. Hello, Xander. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm very good. Thank you, Nacho. And yourself?
I'm very good as well. And as I said in the introduction, it's such a pleasure to have you on for such a very interesting episode. Actually, before going deep into the subject, I wanted to let our audience know that I had the pleasure to attend to an hybrid webinar. Well, it was actually kind of a hybrid conference co-hosted by Microsoft and the European Disability Forum last year. And one of the subjects that was covered on that conference was actually accessibility and inclusion in gaming. And that was the point where I actually got the chance to listen to a wonderful keynote speech by Xander. So yeah, after that brief anecdote, I would like to proceed with the questions. Xander, before going deep into the subject, I would like to know more about your personal background. This is a typical question that we ask to all of our guests. What motivated you to start a professional career on making video games more accessible for persons with disabilities? What obstacles did you find in the gaming industry at the time?
Yeah, great question. So, as you mentioned, I'm the Director of User Experience and Accessibility at Rare Ltd, who are an Xbox game studio. And we're working on Sea of Thieves, a title which has been in live development now for 8 years. We launched in 2018, so so we've had lots of experience in how to kind of refine our gaming experience over time. My pathway into the gaming industry, I came from a UI and UX design background in the web and mobile software industry, and I found myself kind of leaning more into gaming, which is a very different space in terms of accessibility, right? Like we have 3D worlds, we have physics engines, we have lots of considerations that look a lot more like physical accessibility considerations than the kind of straight up web accessibility considerations. So yeah, that's the pathway that kind of led me there. I guess like one of the wonderful things about games, much like certain online experiences, is that games are a place of community, right? Games should be a place of inclusion. Games are where people hang out with their friends. They have enjoyable experiences. Certainly, kind of online multiplayer games can end up being digital third spaces, and so it's vital that we are including people rather than unintentionally excluding people, and that's where my focus on accessibility came from. I'm a UX designer by trade, and UX design is primarily building products for people, and I want to make sure that the products that I build reflect the diversity of the people that we're building them for.
Indeed, and I fully agree with the fact that gaming can actually help with the fact of building new communities where people can find new peers and also develop very interesting careers in the area of gaming. We'll discuss this later, but I would like to stop a moment in the precisely that topic. Developing a video game is such a multi-staged process with different aspects to be aware of, because there are many different things to be considered when you develop a video game. How are accessibility criteria fit in those different development stages, and how is this applied when considering the needs of people with visual impairment?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that honestly I'm asking myself kind of day to day, right? Which is like, what's the best time to consider accessibility within the products that we deliver? Obviously, as you mentioned, there are different kind of phases that we move through as we think about designing, executing, shipping, seeing a product kind of move from a set of ideas into real players' hands who are experiencing that product. I'd say that if you leave it too late, then you end up in a world where your accessibility looks like augmentation. It looks like you are bolting on something, and I'm sure lots of your listeners will have direct experience of this, where you are bolting on a kind of augmentation that isn't necessarily integrated into the experience itself, and that's where we don't want to be, right? Like, we don't want to be in a place where we're going, hey, we've ideated something, we've unintentionally excluded a bunch of people through the kind of limited scope that we're looking at the solution space through, and therefore, in order to be inclusive, we're going to have to bolt something on in order to include the people who we've unintentionally excluded. So lots of my work looks like not necessarily having the solutions early on, but certainly raising the questions early on in our development process of what's our unconscious bias here, right? Like, what assumptions are we making about the capabilities of the people who are going to be playing this experience, and how are we ensuring that diversity of our audience is reflected early on in our prototyping phases, so that we are baking in accessibility, you are baking in like inclusive methods to our processes early on, so that we don't end up, like, I think one of the ways that I phrased this in my recent gaming accessibility conference talk is like, our products meet the diversity of our audience at some point. And if it meets the diversity of our audience too late, we're not going to be able to change it, and we're going to end up in a situation where we've got a bunch of stuff where we go, we didn't really think deeply enough about the needs of the people that we're building this stuff for, and therefore we're unintentionally excluding a bunch of people. So how can we ensure that the diversity of that audience is reflected early in our development cycle, so that we are designing for real people, not imagined people or some kind of artifice of people that look just like me, and that's really vital as we think about how we include accessibility early in our development cycles to ensure that we are building products that are going to meet the needs of the people that want to engage in them.
Yes, indeed. I would actually like to address that point that you made about making your products and services more accessible and inclusive. Because, of course, when you come up with a new invention in the technological area, and especially when we talk about accessibility and inclusion, no matter if we're talking about gaming or other sectors, when trying to conceive something new under the pillars of inclusion and accessibility, surely welcoming people with disabilities on board can really help you in that sense. Precisely. I would like to ask you, do you currently work with developers with disabilities daily in your, when it comes to making the gaming experience more accessible?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can speak to what we do, and I can also speak to where I'd like us to go as well, right? So we absolutely believe in the tenet of nothing about us without us. So we engage with consultants within the gaming accessibility space, people like Sightless Combat, that's his gamer tag, Russ Miner, Shaster, Steve Saylor. These are all people who we have engaged with and paid to help us build better products. They have we hire those consultants to give us specific feedback around specific accessibility features that we work on, and to give us more broader experiential accessibility feedback. So that really helps us ensure that we are reflecting that diversity of our audience within our ability to reason around that implementation. In terms of our more broader audience, we have a specific support page for accessibility features, so that players can go and check that out and see and understand how they can enable certain accessibility features. Or in addition to that, we have a web page that doesn't just lay out the accessibility features that exist, but also the expectations of our experience, so that people can get a sense of the degree to which our experience might be accessible for them. I'm not going to be able to put my hand on my heart and say it's going to be accessible for you, but not for you, because the people who are asking that question will have their own specific, like deep expertise in what their own accessibility needs are. But what we can do is say these are the expectations of our experience, and you can use that to almost self-certify, like, is this going to be accessible enough to meet my needs, or is this going to be I'd hate to think that someone was purchasing our title or purchasing access to our title via Game Pass and then only then discovering that it didn't meet their accessibility needs. So we have a bunch of specific stuff for the audience themselves to ensure that they're able to identify. We also have, I don't think I just mentioned it, but we have a specific bug flow for accessibility bugs, so that if people hit our support site because they can't do a particular thing through accessibility requirements, that's triaged in a separate way to our bugs to ensure that we get kind of clear visibility on that. So that's the efforts that we go to ensure that we're engaging with the disabled community, and we're engaging with people with accessibility requirements. I would say that I think there's still a long way to go, and I'm sure this isn't a problem exclusively to game development, but where we have less control is the accessibility of the tools with which we build our games, right? Like, so things like game engines, things like day-to-day tools, there's still a massive barrier to someone with accessibility needs getting into the games industry and working as a developer themselves, and that's an initiative that I know that Xbox care a great deal about as well. So there's certainly more to be done in that space, but specifically for our title, there's a bunch of stuff that we do to ensure that we are reflecting a diverse lived experience of our audience.
Yes, I guess that it's as always with everything in life, it's a matter of taking one step at a time, and then you're making further progress. I would like also to make a question from the gamer side, because you mentioned that you have experience in the area of user experience, and precisely user experience has gained a lot of importance nowadays, especially since it's closely linked to the building of larger communities. How is this ensured? Do you work closely with testers with disabilities? Is this also a way to help them establish new social connections?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think as I mentioned at the top of this conversation, one of the really rewarding things about working in the field that I do is that I get to build worlds that people enjoy spending time in, and how important it is for games to be considered a third space, a digital third space, a place where people can just hang out, right? Where there is opportunity for social connection, there's opportunity for play, which is such a vital connector between humans, right? Like the kind of that very human need to connect to people, and games provide that, and games can provide that in ways that are more accessible than real world spaces in many instances, right? We saw lots of players connecting via our title Sea of Thieves during the pandemic, when you weren't allowed to connect kind of in real life physically. There was still a space where people could go and hang out with their friends and communicate with each other, and that's really important, that we ensure that we're including people there, and that we build spaces that are welcoming, not just in terms of accessibility, but in terms of things like localization, in terms of things like approachability. Is this a space where I can feel home as a player? Is this a space where I feel welcomed? Is my lived experience represented within this kind of online digital world? All these things are super important. As I mentioned, we have a diverse bunch of people testing our game. We have a broader public insiders cohort, so anyone can sign up at seaofthieves.com/insiders. They can test early builds of our game and give us feedback, and they can give us specific accessibility feedback within that context as well. We also have things like the Accessibility Insider League, which is Xbox's initiative to test a bunch of games, not just the games that I'm working on. And that's super important to us, right? Like, we have such a strong community within Sea of Thieves, and we have such a strong community that cares about the experiences that we build. Of course, we want to make sure that people can access them, people can understand them, people can communicate within them, and that we're not putting unintentional barriers between people and that experience.
Yes. Apart from building diverse teams, compliance with regulations, both national and international, is also something to bear in mind. What are the main pillars that you would underline in this area? How can legislation help us improve precisely user experience and the development of video games?
Yeah, it's fantastic, and it's really important to us, right? I think legislation, when done right, and when it isn't mandating specific technical implementations, but rather it is determining what the outcome should be for the consumer or for the participant in that experience. That allows us to ensure that we're implementing the most appropriate thing within our experience. So, things like the EAA, things like CVAA within the US, these are legislations that I think have worked really well for us within the games industry, because what we're talking about there is parity of experience in the communications in the in the kind of e-commerce spaces, and that makes a ton of sense, because those are quite difficult areas to implement accessibility kind of bolt-ons within, right? But what it ends up being is a springboard for us, because we go and do the hard work in making these communication pathways accessible, and then we go, but it's kind of weird that we'd only make those communication pathways accessible. We should make everything within our title accessible. And we've just done the hard, we've just built narration so that people can communicate with themselves easier. Why aren't we narrating everything? Why are we just narrating the areas as kind of narrowly defined by this legislation? So I think it does a couple of things. I think it helps us as developers, because it draws our focus in interesting ways, but it also ensures that leaders within the space are paying attention, right? And legislation is a very effective lever at making sure that leaders are paying attention in those spaces. So I see legislation, when applied correctly, when not applied in very specific ways that aren't adaptable to a bunch of different contexts, legislation is a fantastic springboard for ensuring that the conversation matures within the industry space, which means that leaders are paying attention and providing time and space and energy for developers to go and make the changes that are necessary to comply with that legislation. And it means that the people who are implementing and making those choices about the lived experience, or about the experience that we're designing for, making sure that those people are skilled up in those areas and are conscious of things like nothing about us without us, about folding people with lived experience of accessibility affordances into our development processes. All of these things you can trace back to kind of key points of legislation where you go, like, this is a good inflection point for us to go and do more as an industry. So yeah, like, I think legislation works really well for us, right?
Yes, there's a good thumbs up that you made there, and which is kind of a video game gesture done by many.
It's an emote,
by many popular characters in the gaming industry. Of course, legislation, when implemented correctly, can bring a lot of progress. I would like precisely to address one aspect concerning technology that is starting to being, let's say, monitored and also followed up by legislation, which is artificial intelligence. It's kind of the new player when it comes to technological advances, and also when it comes to optimizing workflows, etc. We could spend the whole afternoon talking about the different effects that artificial intelligence has on our daily lives. But overall, it's very clear that artificial intelligence software are getting more importance nowadays. How do you see those being applied precisely in the domain of gaming, and how can these advances be best coupled with the principles of accessibility?
Yeah, it's a great question, and a really timely question as well, right? Certainly, kind of moving from legislation into AI. I think there's a potential for it to be a really helpful tool for players in the gaming space. So, things like providing context aware assistance, right? So, I'm a player, I'm struggling with the kind of cognitive load of onboarding into a particular title. Is there an agentic AI that can help me kind of ground myself in this experience, or help me learn the paradigms of, the kind of mechanisms of this particular experience? Certainly for kind of more experimental games or games that are kind of pushing in interesting directions, like, there's a good opportunity to kind of help players onboard quicker into experiences, or to kind of like to overcome some of the cognitive barriers around like early gameplay interactions, where you go, hey, I'm in a brand new world, I don't know the rules of this world, help me understand it. Certainly for things like audio description, right? Like, AI seems like a super vital thing, right? Looking at the way that we architect, physics-based 3D worlds within our implementations, all of the building blocks are there to audio narrate what a player can see, but the actual human interpretation layer to ensure that I'm not just listing out, a kind of list of all the things that you can see in their XY coordinates on screen, that's not necessarily particularly kind of useful. But if we can provide that in a way that's kind of tonally appropriate, if we can provide that in a way that's genuinely helpful, that's kind of there when I ask it, I think of apps like Be My Eyes, whose model invoked at one point in time a human kind of acting as the audio description kind of mechanism. Like, you can shift that towards something that looks more like agentic, right? Potentially. Now, but that's not my domain. But like, if you take that same approach and you apply it to the games space, then it might be that there's vast barriers that we can break down in terms of players with low or no vision, where we can communicate lots of the spatial stuff that we can't otherwise easily communicate, which could be leaps and bounds ahead of where we are now. I guess things like progressive disclosure as well, like learning more about how a player is interacting with an experience, adapting interfaces or options to the degree to which a player is kind of maturing in a particular experience, right? If you're a player who's been playing for a certain length of time and you're engaging with certain mechanics, can an AI help you to kind of interact with more in-depth mechanics? Is there a way we can land you softer in an experience? What I would say it shouldn't do is it shouldn't replace lived experience input from real players, right? We shouldn't be looking to AI to go, hey, tell us about the lived experience of people who rely on these accessibility affordances. Again, I'll come back to the nothing about us without us principle and go, like, I think that would be a misstep. And it should never be used as an excuse not to fold accessible design in from the start, right? If we go, hey, we can build whatever we like, the AI will fix all of our kind of accessibility kind of missteps, I think you end up in a really weird place there as well, right? Where you're not folding in inclusive design early. You end up kind of, as I mentioned, you end up with these kind of augmentative or additive kind of bolt-ons to an experience which don't really feel like inclusion. They feel like adaptation, and that feels wrong. So yeah, like, there's really interesting spaces that we can explore with AI. I'm excited to see what that looks like.
Yes, indeed. Of course, as we always say, time will tell. It's just a matter of seeing how developments take place and how AI is being slowly implemented in the different areas of life, and of course in the different industries that are potentially concerned by the progressive implementation of this kind of softwares. Xander, it's been a real pleasure talking to you, and it's been great talking to you. Just to let you know, for our visual impaired audience, behind me there's a beautiful picture of Paris at night. Xander, since you are in the gaming industry, I would just like to make you a personal question. Do you think that Paris at night could be a perfect scenario for an adventures video game, or what type of game do you think?
Paris at night is a very evocative image, right? Like, is one of the things that I think we're always keen for, in the entertainment business, whether that's gaming, whether that's film, that emotive, evocative references are always a winner, right? So yeah, I'm sure that there's a game out there just waiting to be made that involves nighttime Paris. Why not?
Yeah. Definitely, this is and of course, correct me if I'm mistaken, because I'm pretty sure that you are familiar with that term. This is what in the gaming community is called, but also in other domains, Easter eggs, which is actually references to to real life or other cultural aspects. So you've given me a great response before you've gained your 1-up point with your thumbs up, and I'm giving you another one. So here it goes, 2 thumbs ups for you, Xander, for the wonderful interview and for the wonderful suggestion. Of course, we hope that blind and partially sighted people are able to enjoy adventure games or whatever type of games where they can also feel the breeze and the exciting vibe of Paris at night. And of course, above all, we are very happy to have talked with Xander Ashwell from Microsoft. in this episode of Ally Techies, the insights of inclusive innovation. Ally Techies, the insights of inclusive innovation. Space produced by the European Blind Union, the voice of blind and partially sighted people in Europe.